buying time, killing people that's in line. Lower classes, social slime, they don't matter. Genocide, sick from water, sick from air. Making money, they don't care. Caesar shit, force of air. Fuck them back, it's only for they bomb. They shoot, they kill, they massacre, rape. They burn the kids, no one makes countries. Lie to your face, fight and die, 'cause God forgives. Selling lies and buying time, killing people next in line. Lower classes, social slide, they don't matter. Genocide, sick from water, sick from air. Making money, they don't care. See their shit, force a bear. Fuck them back, that's only fair. They bomb, they shoot, they kill, they massacre, rape. They burn the kids, no one leaves countries. Lie to your face, fight and die, 'cause God forgives. Yeah. Coming back around again.
Welcome to Game On. I'm your host, Ron Stevens. It is October the 25th, 2015, and we're going to be doing this for the next 2 hours, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. I was just talking to a friend and a really thorough investigative researcher, I guess you would call her, who I think has a better handle on this whole idea of regionalization and what's going on in our communities as far as our water systems go, and the solar panels, windmill things that are going on. I mean, this is a lady who I have the utmost respect for, who is dealing, like I try to encourage people all the time to do, you got to block out all the noise. What's going on with Putin or Syria or Obama or our prime minister, really you can't do much about. Okay? The only frickin' possible place that you can make any positive change and start pushing this nonsense back is at the local level. And Kathy, I don't know anybody that has a better handle on the local level than Kathy does. So I sent her a message, and hopefully she's done what she has to do in the next 15 minutes or so. So what I'm probably going to do is just go through some news and a few other things to the bottom of the hour, and then I'm going to try and get a hold of Kathy and see if we can get her into the show today. She's an extraordinarily busy woman, and has her hands full most of the time, and so I'm really got my fingers crossed that get her in here at the bottom of the hour. And that's the plan. I'm just going to go over a few ridiculous news stories here for a few minutes. And I want to put a video in that I just got out of Edmonton, and I don't think any other video really that I've come across explains the situation between the people and the police as well as this does. There's all kinds of videos up on the internet, police punching the snot out of people and really nasty crap. But this particular video, I don't believe anybody has really explained this better than this gentleman from Edmonton. Now, I have been to the police station and talked to the head investigators and that at the police station about what their officers are up to, and it's almost identical to what's going on in this interview with this gentleman. And it fully shows the amoral legal system for what it is, and it is amoral. When you hear these investigators or the sergeants or whatever that are above the regular police, you can tell they're amoral. Because they have to be, because they're in the legal system. So the responses that the investigator, whoever he is giving to this gentleman in Edmonton, I mean, if you listen to the responses, you would get very quickly what I'm talking about as far as this amoral situation. And there's no morality in policing. Okay, their job is to bring meat to grinder. That's their only job, When you phone the police, they're there looking for some way to fire a ticket off so that they can drag you into the meat grinder, which pays their bosses, which are the lawyers, and the judges, and the court system, and the clerk's offices, okay? Because without the police dragging people in, the court services would pretty much cease to exist. If the only people that were brought to court were people that actually caused harm, well, it would be a very, very small system because very few people actually cause harm. So anyways, I'm going to really quickly try and find where this video went because I end up with so many freaking tabs open. Now, where is that? I better be able to find it, and I don't see it. That sucks. That really sucks. Where? Oh, here it is. Okay, so this guy's at an internal affairs meeting in Edmonton. And he has the pictures, still pictures of what was going on. Now, I don't know why these police ended up at his house. I have no idea about that whatsoever. That's not the point. But take a boo at that when you get a chance. And I will probably end up putting that up on my blog and my Facebook because it's a real testimony from a man as to what the police force actually is. And it is the force that guards and protects the state. That's their only function. Now, let me see what we got here. Here's a story that I haven't read yet, but we're going to go through it. It says here, explosions and gunshots rock the streets of Montreal, but it's just an anti-terrorism drill. Canada has always been spewed off to the world as probably the most peaceful nation on the planet. The good guys, the wonderful place with not too much population and lots of resources, beautiful mountains, rivers, streams, valleys, just a gorgeous place. But now we seem to have a problem of possible terrorism. I'm going to read this, and then we'll see where we go from here. Explosions and gunshots rang out in downtown Montreal early Saturday afternoon, but police were quick to reassure startled tourists and weekend shoppers it was just a simulation to test the city's anti-terrorism response. Now, apparently, they didn't put any signs up warning people that this was what they were going to do, because apparently they started the hell out of the tourists and the shoppers. You know, you're downtown Montreal shopping, you're a tourist, and all of a sudden explosions start going off. I suppose that would freak people out. After they freak people out, then they explain to them, oh, we're just doing a simulation. Several busy streets were shut down for a few hours as more than 350 responders were deployed to participate in Montreal 360, the city's largest emergency exercise since 2005. Now, I believe 360, if I'm not mistaken, is also the target for let me see. I think it's the target for CO2. Could be wrong. Let me take a quick boo at this. Yeah, Yale Environment 360 CO2 milestone reached. Yeah, so I think 360. Yeah, so that was supposed to be, I think, our upper limit that the world could handle as far as CO2 levels. So they call it Montreal 360. The simulation was organized as a collaboration between Montreal Police, Quebec Provincial Police, and RCMP. These are all employees of the Queen and other emergency services in the city's anti-terrorism committee. Now, I put this part about them being employees of the Queen because you're not going to read that in the newspaper. The program started Saturday morning at the Long Point Canadian Forces Base in East Montreal, where the scenario presented a deadly sarin nerve gas attack on a city bus. Ooh. A gas mask-equipped tactical unit stormed the bus, shooting the suspect and unloading poisoned victims. A hazmat team then set up a tent to treat the victims and contain the contamination, which makes me laugh because when the police and the agents raided Michael Smith's raw milk operation, before they entered the barns and the milk house, they donned hazmat suits because the government has deemed raw milk to be a hazardous substance. So they could have easily, instead of using a gas attack on the bus, I suppose they could have had some wacko go in and start, maybe a water gun full of raw milk and spraying that around on the inside of the bus would have had the same effect. But they wanted to use gas. I guess it's more hazardous, but not really, because they're both raw milk and sarin gas are both labeled with the same tag. They're hazardous substances. This event was closed to the public and observed by about 200 officials. The exercise then moved downtown Montreal, where roads were closed to traffic and pedestrians as Montreal 360 simulated an attack by gunmen centered around the Black Watch Armory and police headquarters. Blank cartridges were fired and fake grenades exploded in this scenario that raged on the empty streets. For the full effect, victims wore makeup and carried fake blood bags to test the life-saving skills of ambulance crews on the scene. Police say each business and resident in the area received a note saying the simulation would be taking place. The large police presence took some people by surprise, while others had heard about the event and came to watch the spectacle. I think everybody knows there is a probability that we could be under attack by something So I just think it's a good idea to practice it so the police are well prepared, said David Olivier, an exchange student from Denmark, where 3 people were killed during a shooting in Copenhagen last February. Now, what's the odds on somebody just happening to run into David Olivier, an exchange student from Denmark, while this is taking place? I'm thinking about the same odds as winning the big one, which is about 14 million to 1. So this was obviously staged. His little spiel there. I think that makes everyone safer, he says. Well, okay. This event was announced just 2 days earlier, and Montreal police declined to do any interview on Saturday. It's not a show, it's a simulation to test the preparedness of police services and its partners, says Montreal police spokesman Saint Laurent Gingras. While police have not said there is an imminent threat of terrorism up to the city, an internal report obtained by Global News in June classifies the terror threat level in Montreal, Vancouver, Edmonton, and Greater Toronto Area at medium. Medium means an individual or group has the capability and intent to carry out an attack. An act of terrorism could occur. It was almost exactly 1 year ago, on October 20th, the lone wolf terrorist Martin Couture Rouleau rammed 2 Canadian Force members' police cars with his car in, or members with his car in Saint-Jean, sur Richelieu, south of Montreal. 2 days later, on October 22nd, Michael Bibeau attacked Parliament Hill in Ottawa, killing a Canadian soldier on ceremonial sentry duty. The Montreal Police website says authorities in North America have felt increasingly concerned with security and that the force has highly specialized multidisciplinary personnel trained in internationally recognized risk analysis methods. Now, all of the police in this country and the United States and Britain and Australia and anywhere else you want to go to are all been internationalized and militarized. Okay, this is straight out of the UN, because the UN wishes to build a global police force, which they've already done because they're in Montreal playing their stupid games. These are not members any longer of you can't even say Canada, because Canada's a stupid corporation. Okay, these people operate for the state, for the benefit of the state. Okay, and we all know by now that the United Nations, part of the plan is the end of nation states, to bring all of this stuff, the governance, the police forces, the electricity, your water, your housing, your education, your medical, everything, into an international forum. Okay, so this simulation, they call it here, is really an international force on your lands. And your politicians, which aren't your politicians, are employees of the Queen, have implemented this through treaties and writs of memorandum and that with different organizations of the United Nations. So, you know, the only thing you would call it is treason against the people, but is it really treason against the people? Because the politicians work for the state. And the state is, the head of state is the Queen, and the head of the Queen is the Vatican. So you could call these Roman centurions, if you wish, beating down the people, okay, because you qualify as a subject. A citizen is interchangeable with subject, and subject is subservient to, which is the calling of a slave. So the international forces are here to protect the state against uppity slaves. That's what's going on. Anyway, let me continue this. Anti-terrorism. Does that word make you ask, are some of your police officers becoming Jack Bauer, the counterterrorism agent played by Kiefer Sutherland in the show 24, of which I've never seen? But Kiefer's dad, Donald, and actually Kiefer, now I got somebody calling me here, so we'll see who this is. And see what's cooking here. Hello, caller?
Did I dial the right number?
I have no idea. Were you looking for pizza?
No.
Were you looking for UCY Radio?
Now I'm looking for Revolution Radio.
Oh, they did that again. No, I did a show last night on Revolution Radio. And
okay.
I don't know how they get these numbers crossed up here, but this show's Game On UCY. Anyways, well, I got you. You got any questions?
No, really not at all.
No? Well, then, can you run down to Pizza and grab me a slice?
Sure.
I appreciate that. I'm in...
On my way.
All right. All right, ciao.
All right.
Well, that was interesting. I'm not even getting a piece of pizza, man. It sucks. Okay, so Keith, this kills me how they do this, right? Because Kiefer Sutherland is the son of Donald Sutherland, and Donald Sutherland is married to, let's see, I can't remember his name now, the guy who brought us universal health care in Canada, who just happened to be funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. And Donald Sutherland is very happy that Justin Trudeau was elected prime minister, even though Sutherland doesn't live here and hasn't in decades. But it's all leftist crap. Okay, so that's just a quick background on those guys. Anyway, I'll put this thing in the chat, and you guys go through it. There's some video in here, which I'm not going to watch right now. And but this is, and the other part of what's going on here is we are about to be inundated with migrants. Okay, that was part of why the Liberals were given a majority government, so that they could open the floodgates. And bring in the migrants, okay? And all you have to do is look in Europe as to what's going on with the migrants, okay? There's very few, if any, women and children coming along. These are soldiers, okay? These are Islamic soldiers is what they are. And they're coming to take down the nation states of the West, to destroy them. So it just makes sense that they're making these simulations about possible terrorism. It's not terrorism from the inside, okay? It's terrorism from the outside. And once these migrants start coming in and saying that they don't have to obey the laws of this land, which are state laws, protection of the state, that they only have to, and you see all kinds of videos of this over in Europe, where the Muslims or the Islamics are running, and when the police go in to a neighborhood, you can see the police running out of the neighborhood because they're being chased out by the migrants who say they don't recognize this Western law. They only recognize Sharia law. And then they're putting claim on the land. They say, this is our land. Okay? So that's what's coming our way. And people need to wake up to that fact. So these simulations are not about domestic terrorism. They're expecting cities to burn, neighborhoods to burn. They expect major clashes between the people that are here with this outside society coming in saying that we're taking over. So, that's exactly what's going to happen here, and that's exactly why they put a left party in power with a majority government. That's just the way that operates. So get prepared. Now, there was another story here that I wanted to just touch on, and then I'm going to call and see if I can get a hold of Kathy. And that is to do with our new Prime Minister. Okay, Prime Minister. Now, the first corporation came out of Rome under canon law. Now, they tell us we're under civil law now. They rebrand crap, okay? Just like they rebranded the Hudson's Bay Company into Canada. Hudson's Bay Company is a corporation, and they rebranded it into Canada. They told us they gave us good government because the people, the settlers here, were being told what they couldn't do by the Hudson's Bay Company, and the people told the Hudson's Bay Company to shove off because they didn't work for the company. And so that's when we got our parliamentary system, okay? And it's a ruse. It's a corporation, always been a corporation. So the new CEO of Canada, who applies himself as the Prime Minister, but really is the CEO of the corporation. Now, this is very dangerous as well. But see, this is all planned out in the back rooms at the UN, at the Trilateral Commission, at the Rockefeller Foundation, which really is the United Nations. They plan all this stuff out ahead. These elections are all planned out. Okay, who is the best? Is it left or right that we need to put in here now to move our next stage of the plan? So this is really the first time I've ever seen anything like this. Trudeau invites Elizabeth May, who is of the Green Party, who is a signatory to the Earth Charter with Maurice Strong and Mikhail Gorbachev and Suzuki's little girl and a few other people. I think there's a Rothschild involved in that, in the signing of the Earth Charter. And so Trudeau invites Elizabeth May of the Green Party, which was running against the Liberal Party in the election, but she is up to her eyeballs in the fraud of environmental movement. And so he invites her and other party leaders to the Paris Climate Change Summit. Now, I highly doubt, I would be quite surprised if the conservative leader or the members will go, although there are conservative members involved and are members of the UNPA, which is the United Nations Parliamentary Assembly, pushing for a United Nations Parliamentary Assembly, which will basically overshadow our own parliaments. So, we have members, lots of members from the Senate, members of the UNPA, lots of members. Elizabeth May is a member of the UNPA. Justin Trudeau is a member of the UNPA. David Suzuki is a member of the UNPA. And it just goes on and on and on and on. So now we have this coalition of party leaders, and he wants to invite Elizabeth May and other leaders to the Paris Climate Change Summit, which no one has ever done before. You don't invite your opposition along for the ride. But this is to solidify the thrust of the movement, to say everybody's on side with this now. as they tie a rope around our throats as far as water usage, electricity usage, carbon taxes, and so on and so forth. It's very, very dangerous. So if the Montreal police and the RCMP are looking for terrorists, they need no look any further than their bosses. Okay, those are the terrorists against the people. So anyways, really quickly, because I see it's 12:30, and we're going to hold a Kathy. Whatever else political opponents may say about Justin Trudeau's approach to reducing carbon emissions, they're not likely to curse his lack of inclusiveness. Now, the United Nations and the world government is all about inclusiveness, okay? I mean, that's one of their go words. The Prime Minister designate has already invited Green leader Elizabeth May to be part of the Canadian delegation to the United Nations Summit on Climate Change in Paris at the end of next month. And he intends to invite NDP leader Tom Mulcair and whomever is leading the Conservative Party, be it Stephen Harper or an interim leader as well, along with various non-governmental organizations and environmentalists, insiders say. The premiers of all provinces and territories that aren't facing an election this fall have also agreed to accompany Trudeau. Okay, so they're going to come back with a unified wall from Paris, and it's going to be like a green death spreading across these lands. It's going to get ugly. Okay, they're opening the gates. Anyways, Trudeau's inclusive approach is in stark contrast to that adopted by Harper's defeated Conservative government, which strictly limited participation delegations to previous climate summits, entirely excluding opposition parties. Well, why would you bring an opposition party if you have a majority government? Why would you do that? Of course you wouldn't do that. You're the CEO of the company. Now, if you're a legitimate CEO of the company, your job is to run the company, not to bring in CEOs from other companies, which would be the opposition parties, to give you backing. That just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in business. It doesn't happen in politics. But this is the new way of going. Okay. Indeed, back in 2011, before becoming Liberal leader, Trudeau was so incensed by the Harper government, incensed he was, a little fart, exclusionary policy that he called the environment minister at the time, Peter Kent, who just happened to be a talking head on, I think it was CTV News for like years and years and years, a piece of shit is what Trudeau called him, in the House of Commons, no less. So here we have the new PM, CEO, when he was in opposition, calling the legitimate CEO or board member, Peter Kent, who is the environment minister, and Trudeau stands up in the House of Commons and calls Peter Kent a piece of shit. His unparliamentary outburst, for which he apologized, was prompted by Kent needling the NDP's environment critic for not having gone to the climate change conference in Durban, South Africa, when the government had refused to accredit any opposition MPs. And this this is short from here. At a 2013 UN climate conference in Warsaw, Poland, May ended up joining the Afghanistan delegation after the Harper government refused once again to include any opposition. Now, see, May, who's the leader of the Green Party, ends up joining the Afghanistan delegation. Okay, May has no, she's amoral. Okay, she's a lawyer, so we know she's amoral, and she's pushing the Earth Charter. She signed the Earth Charter, which we definitely know she's amoral, and she's an absolute psychotic, psychopath, sociopath, liar, and she doesn't give a damn about anybody on these lands. Okay, she works exclusively as an agent for the UN, as which Harper was too. And all of our so-called politicians are employees of the Queen, and they are pushing the doctrine of the Crown and the Vatican, which is the destruction of nation states. It is a war, psychological, spiritual war. It is World War III. And we got to come to grips with that. And May goes on to say, I was an environmental refugee. It's absolutely outrageous what Harper did. Well, wait a minute. How is that more outrageous than what you've done? It's an impossibility. May said Trudeau's more inclusive approach is not surprising. He is simply returning to the traditional practice of having delegations to international conferences represent Canada, not just the governing party. So when they say represent Canada, they're talking about represent the corporation, not just the party sitting in the boardroom. Still, she said, it bodes well for Canada, playing a more constructive role in reaching a global agreement on reducing carbon emissions. She expects Trudeau to be the polar opposite of Harper, whose environmentalists have long denounced as a climate laggard. Well, don't forget, Harper is the one, okay, who appointed the new Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, which is straight out of the United Nations, okay, who did the second forward on Local Agenda 21, first one being done by Maurice Strong. So if Harper is so anti-environment, what's he doing appointing a lieutenant governor who sits in place of Queen, the boss, who was the second intro to Local Agenda 21? And they're always bitching about the Conservatives. Well, who brought us Agenda 21 in the first place? Brian Mulroney. Was he a Conservative? And what did Brian Mulroney do? He appointed Maurice Strong to the Privy Council. So it's all smoke and mirrors. They all work for the same team, which is the global team. And you ain't on that team. Anyways, this goes on here. Anyways, May, who requested and received a 30-minute meeting with Trudeau this week, even as he was immersed in transition plans for swearing in a new government, said his willingness to engage with opposition parties is also encouraging, suggesting a less hyper-partisan style of governing. The Paris Summit is aimed at negotiating post-2020 targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, following the last major summit that resulted in 2009's Copenhagen Accord. May said the draft text of an agreement is weak, and if Canada is to prod the conference to agree to something stronger, it will have to set a national target for emission reductions. During the election campaign, Trudeau steered clear of setting a target, arguing that setting targets that are never met is pointless. He promised instead to work with premiers to develop a national framework to combat climate change. How in the hell? You can't combat climate change, obviously, because, well, the climate is different today than it was yesterday, and it will be different at 4 o'clock this afternoon than it is right now. Okay? So we know that these people are lunatics. We need a global accord on climate change. That was rebranded from man-made global warming. Because the globe didn't warm. Oops. When's the globe going to warm? Well, it's not. Why not? Well, that was kind of a ruse. Well, now what? People are starting to ask questions. I know, but people are generally stupid. So we'll just call it climate change now. Oh, works for us. And these are the people that are going overseas to Paris to save us from climate change, which, of course, is a total impossibility. It never was about climate change. It is about two things: global control by a very, very small number of people and the depopulation of the planet. That's what it's about. And I would call that terrorism. So you might want to pick up the phone and call the RCMP or your local police force and say, I have a terrorist alert that you need to look into. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow. And then I'll put it up on the internet, see how it went. Let me see. At a post-election news conference Tuesday, Trudeau said he'd already begun talking to premiers with the aim of establishing a strong position for the Paris summit so that people know that Canada's years of being a less than enthusiastic actor on the climate change file are behind us. Under Harper, Canada withdrew from the original Kyoto Protocol on greenhouse gas emissions, but as Kathy pointed out, and I'm going to call her right after I'm done this, as Kathy had pointed out, he withdrew from the original Kyoto proposal, but didn't withdraw from a whole bunch of other stuff, which are more binding and more dangerous, apparently, than the Kyoto Protocol. And if I'm wrong on that, Kathy, of course, will straighten me out on it. Canada is currently not close to meeting its subsequent Copenhagen commitment by slashing emissions by 17% by 2020. However, the Harper government did put forward an aggressive target in May for cutting greenhouse gas emissions by 30% from 2005 levels by 2030. So now we've upped it about almost 100%. Okay? The original was to slash emissions by 17% by 2020. Now, Harper put forward a target of 30% from 2005 levels by 2030. So, you know, they keep ramping it up. And then we're going to end up getting to where the other numbers are, where you have some of these eminent scientists and lunatics saying that we need to cut it by 80%. And Bill Gates also says we need to cut it by 80%, but probably that won't do. We'll probably have to cut it by 100%. Well, the more you cut the greenhouse gas, the more difficult it is for the plants. Okay? Because CO2 is the life gas of the plants. So the more you cut the CO2 emissions, the harder it is for the plants. The plants exhale oxygen, which is what we breathe, which makes it more difficult for us. Okay? So it's called a normal, natural Earth cycle that these people want to mess with. Okay? And they do wish to depopulate the planet, and that's why CO2 was picked as the nasty gas, if you want to call it that. So, you know, like I always say, man, we got to keep talking, keep teaching, keep shining the light, man. We got to get to the people. We got to get to the people. So let me see what's cooking here. I got a note from Kathy. Anytime now, hope I can pull this off without confusing your listeners. Well, you won't confuse them, because if you do confuse them, that just makes them go get on confused. So I'm going to add Kathy to the group right now, and I want a huge round of applause. I want some foot stomping. I want to hear some drums and trumpets going, because this is a lady that I have absolutely the utmost respect for. And we should all, and I know it's difficult, you know, people are working 2-3 jobs, you know, they got TV to watch and newspapers to read and this and that and the other thing. It takes a lot of dedication, and Kathy is a very dedicated woman, and I have like I said, the utmost respect for her and what she does, and she has taught me an awful lot, because while I dig in a lot of files, I'm buzzing around in different places where Kathy is actually doing exactly what I've been telling people to do. Get your eyes down at the local level, because that's where you live and that's where your boots are. And the whole process, the whole global process, is built on global to local. Having the local politicians implement the global agenda without ever telling the local people what they're up to, and in turn handing all power over to the globalists. So it's extremely important that we get to our local levels. You know, yammering on about, somebody sent me something yesterday, Putin for president. Like, shut up. You know, I mean, they're all in this together, okay? You know, You got to remember this. All countries are member states of the UN. The UN was formed to stop aggression. We haven't stopped dropping bombs since the end of World War II. Okay? And the United Nations was set up as a front, which it is. And we better get that through our thick skulls, too. Anyways, I'm going to bring Kathy on here right away. And we'll see if we can hook up with her. And hopefully we can. And we wait. And we wait, and I hear a voice. I hear a voice. All right, everybody, let the trumpets go. Stomp the feet, shake the hands, wave your hands in the air. Kathy Hamilton is on board.
Hi, Ron.
Hey, Kathy, how you doing here?
I thought I'd better turn the player off because it gets a little confusing. I'm going to do my best with this, but it's something I need to work at documenting, and until I do, you know how anal I am about having everything in order. And but this is something that I've been working on, and I haven't had a chance to finish yet. But because it combines the global economic development paradigm that just drives me crazy, because all economic development pursuit under the sustainability agenda is obviously subsidized, which means it's uneconomic, and that's the big joke on our taxpayers to me. So the little story that I want to share is actually a combination of the Northland Power pumped up pixie dust nonsense that's been going on for 4 years. And it's combined with the economic development nonsense, and it sort of shows how the two are interdependent, to borrow a word from, the globalists. And so I think probably where I would start is there was a story in the local paper, and it was about the October 6th, I believe, council meeting.
Okay, Kathy, just let me jump in for a second. For those who don't know, Kathy is in Marmor, Ontario, which is just, half an hour north of Belleville, is it?
Yeah, but
which is between Toronto and Kingston, about halfway. Okay, so that's her neck of the woods. Okay, but her neck of the woods, what's going on there, is going on in your own local communities. So I just wanted people to have some kind of reference point as to where you're at.
Yeah, well, what makes it really interesting for me, and I've said this over and over, is people who live in large urban centers, large cities, they have bigger councils, there's a lot more going on, and the money being shelled out for things is going to be on a greater scale. But it's also probably harder for them to make the global to local links to everything that's going on. And our little tiny rinky-dink municipality just has become a real poster child for this everything nonsensical about the Sustainable Development Agenda, which is, of course, part of that is the climate change nonsense, and part of it is the biodiversity. So and then when you look at the economic development thing, and I think back all the time to an article that was actually authored by Terence Corcoran in the Financial Post comment section. I think it was early March 2012, where he put out a proposal to the then conservative government, so-called conservatives, and it's when Jim Flaherty was still alive and our finance minister, and he made the recommendation on his chopping block article that they cut the funding to the Regional Economic Development Corporation. And that was one of my favorite articles he ever wrote, because to me, a great deal of what's being imposed at the local level to fulfill the global plan, they'd have a hard time doing it without the help of the social entrepreneurs in the subsidized industry that's now called economic development. Have I lost you already?
No,
Hello?
you haven't lost me at all.
Okay.
No, this is all important stuff for people to understand. It may be difficult for them because, I don't think most people have your depth of knowledge about this stuff. So we're just going to have to, let you run with it. And then if people have questions about something, either call it in or stick it in the chat, and then we can deal with it.
Yeah.
Because I'm serious. Most people they read about Putin, they read about Syria, right? But they don't understand the mechanisms being used at the local level. And you're, as far as I'm concerned, the number one expert in the entire country.
Oh, right.
Well, you are. I haven't found anybody else. I haven't read anybody else that has worked their way through this like you have. And you can call it anal or whatever you want to call it, but I mean, you dig deep on this local level stuff. So just whatever works for you.
Yeah, well, I had a little more inspiration to do so than most people. There's been a lot of people fighting a lot of local battles, and especially in Ontario with so-called renewable energy projects. But not many of them were facing quite the physically threatening situation that just sent me off the deep end in 2011. And that was my introduction to this whole big ball of wax. But, so anybody who hasn't heard the previous shows I did with you on Orion way back since 2011, maybe lost, and I hate to repeat too much, so I'll try not to. But, what I'm going to talk about today is the economic development interdependency with this supposed green energy project called pumps. They call it pump storage that was dumped on us in 2011. And in particular, not with the project itself per se, but with the taxpayer-funded promotion of that private developer's project. This is what really it drives me around the bend, because this was a Northland Power proposal to Marmorant Lake, and it was a joint partnership project proposal with Aecon, so two very large, very well-known corporations. And, they have all kinds of money themselves, so it annoyed me to no end to see taxpayer money being, blown in the wind, really, just pissed away, trying to promote their project on their behalf. My stand from day one is they want to promote that project, they should do it on their own time and dime. But our tax dollars locally and now twice provincial tax dollars have been spent on trying to promote this project.
Yes, but isn't that just the merger of government and business, right? That's corporatism. It used to be when a business wanted to do business, that was their problem, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And now you have the government using, like you said, the taxpayers' money to promote somebody's business.
Well, and it's not even just the government. This is where the economic development industry steps in, which is referred to, they fall under the general umbrella internationally as under the definition of social entrepreneurs. So they are in the category of change agents, change masters, whatever you want to call it. But the problem is not only have we had our politicians who we're paying their wages, and we're paying for all of their perks and their privileges and their expense accounts. Not only have we been paying our politicians to promote this project for a private developer, okay, but then the politicians are spending our tax dollars so that paid, taxpayer-funded, taxpayer-dependent economic development entrepreneurs can then also cash in on it. Basically make work programs for economic development staff, economic development committees. So it's no small laughing matter. Now, in our case, admittedly, you're talking about a relatively small amount of money. But the same thing applies for huge, projects. And what really bugs me is this is continuing to go on here for a project that was proposed publicly anyway. Back in June 2011, we were introduced to it. The public was, and the press. But what's really annoying is that this has been going on ever since, and there's no end in sight. And if it's done here, it's done everywhere, and probably on many different types of projects. So, and it would tie in as well to projects that fall under any sort of downtown revitalization, brownfields development, redevelopment. You're looking, economic development is involved in all of these things.
And the economic development comes from the government side, right? Well,
it's a taxpayer subsidized industry. Much like to my mind, okay, how I can put it probably most briefly is, to my mind, it's sort of like the wind and solar and intermittent renewables industry. Without the ratepayer subsidies for these projects, they'd never get built. They'd have never flown. Well, to my mind, without the subsidies from the taxpayers, there would be no economic development industry either. And this is why I take it back to Terence Corcoran's, because it starts at the top level, with federal funding for the regional development corporations, but then, of course, there's also funding going in from lower levels. And at almost every municipal level, or at the very least county or regional level, you've also got economic development departments and, endless numbers of economic development consultants and whatnot, and all of them. So it's a completely taxpayer-dependent industry. I mean, it didn't exist when I was a kid. So it almost like it came out of thin air. But then when you understand the UN agenda, the global agenda, no, it's very much a part of the means of its implementation.
Yeah,
and it serves the same purpose. It's literally going to break the developed countries.
But then that's the plan, right?
Exactly. You remember me talking in a previous show about the CARALED program. There's another example. Remember the CARALED program under CETA?
No, I don't.
And I taught that at our local level, too, when there was this big announcement that, we'd been chosen amongst the Federation of Canadian Municipalities volunteer pool for economic development experts to go down and try to boost economic development in the Caribbean.
Oh, that, yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Same thing, so, I mean, that's got... As far as I can see the economic development industry, I have the feeling that even the green energy, the so-called green energy, the subsidized green energy industry, I have the feeling they'd sink if it wasn't. I have the feeling at this point in time, and I'm not sure. I'm still watching both, but the ties between that and the economic development industry. And economic development now also includes what they call, sustainable economic development, which is, quite frankly, obviously an oxymoron if you think that sustainability doesn't require taxpayer funding. And it also includes, within its umbrella group of social entrepreneurs, you've got the so-called sustainable tourism industry. So, it just keeps building.
Yeah, it's attached itself to everything, right?
Exactly. And I think you've seen that with the, whenever you see a locally proposed renewable energy project, we've seen the same thing as we've seen here with this green energy project that's not a renewable, okay? And they always talk about, but look at the economic development opportunities and the ecotourism opportunities. Well, that's why. Now,
they
took
just
that excuse away. What have they got left?
Well, yeah, if economic development, which is funding all this stuff, ceased to exist, none of what's going on would be happening. It just wouldn't happen.
Well,
it couldn't happen.
That's my developing hypothesis. Let me put it that way. People seem to be focused on the green energy part of Ontario's Green Energy and Green Economy Act. So since late 2011, I started focusing more on the green economy aspect of it. And to me, they could never get to that greater goal without the sustainable economic development movement, which, and it's funny because even Ontario's Eco-Commish, remember Gord Miller?
Uh-huh.
Okay. He referred to that in, I think it was, don't quote me here because I don't have it in front of me, his 2006 or 2007 report as there's this little problem because economic development, thought of in the traditional terms, basically free enterprise, wealth-creating, independent business, presents an irreconcilable difference with sustainable development. So even he recognized that this new industry of sustainable economic development is an oxymoron, and it's putting two, a traditional and a new field, concepts together in a very oxymoronic way. And so basically we're funding an oxymoron.
Well, they build on this nonsense, like I when I first read that piece from Paul Warburg, that they needed a mechanism. And it's obvious the mechanism that was chosen was environment because they needed a global problem that only a global solution could deal with. That was the setup, and everything they've done since is based on that. So you have NGOs, you know this, Kathy, you have NGOs writing all these papers which are being funded by outfits like the Rockefeller Foundation and others, who bring those papers forward to the government, although the government's already in on it, to get the people to believe that this is actually a problem, and that they have the solution, and the government needs to implement the solution in order to solve the problem. And it goes on and on and on and on and on. And so it's just continually expanded. When this place was built, when your town was built or our town was built, you looked after, when they put the town there that you're in, you're near a river, which most towns were built near a river or a lake because of water source. And you looked after your water source, you looked after your flooding problems, you looked after it locally. Now all that's being taken away.
Yeah, well, I'm looking at the common thread. When you look at sustainable development as a comprehensive program, okay, including climate change and everything, and it takes in, the two sister conventions that are, really affecting Canada still, and because no one's ever withdrawn from them. No government has ever withdrawn from them. The conservatives there was this big hoopla about them withdrawing from Kyoto, but, the first question is, well, why didn't you just withdraw from the UNFCCC? And then you'd automatically have been out of Kyoto as well. But, oh no, but when you take the common thread between all of the green energy projects going in locally, talk about the land use restrictions, the urban growth boundaries, and the community improvement plans, which I could talk about too, because there's some interesting stuff here with that. But, when you take all of the green energy stuff, all of the land use planning stuff, and put it together, which combines the UNFCCC, which focuses on protecting the atmosphere, and that seems to be, one of the Liberal Party pet, that's one of their pet things, protecting the atmosphere. And then you take the land use planning, and which is protecting the land and protecting the soil and protecting the water. This is basically, there's overlap, but this is basically primarily under the auspices of the Convention on Biodiversity. And that has always seemed to have been a conservative, so-called conservative party focus. And as Elizabeth May once said, Brian Mulroney saved the Convention on Biodiversity. And it's funny because not many Canadians probably know that, under the Harper-Tories in the last couple of years, we suddenly had a national conservation plan. How many people,
Well, this is the thing.
You have the two parties have, generally, I'm talking very generally, that I've noticed over time have their pet convention and their pet topics and focuses. But when you put the two together, which is what I'm looking at, then you're seeing the interlinkage and the really handy mechanism for imposition at the local level through the new global economic development paradigm.
Well, that's really
and so
good.
That's why the economic development industry has always been a focus for me, and I'm seeing the latest move here it's entertained me. It's tickled my funny bone to no extent. But I'm not sure if I can get the entertainment of what's been going on here lately through to your listeners.
Well, but one of the things you said that's really important, okay, is through this last election and for the last bunch of years, it's been dump Harper because he's anti-environment and all that kind of stuff. But when you go down to the local level, just like you said, and I've said for years, each of these main parties have a part to play. And even though they were calling Harper all the last bunch of years that he was in power, that he's anti-environment and this and that, when you look at the local level, the sustainable development model didn't stop when Harper was in power.
No, the implementation, to my mind, once the Harper-Tories, all but one, supported which I put a link, by the way, to my post-election analysis before I started talking.
Okay.
And, it kind of points it out. I remember Elizabeth May, also complaining about all the years of liberal inaction when she was campaigning last election, And, there was. They did a lot of things, but they really didn't cut the mustard until, the local implementation really ramped up once we got the Federal Sustainable Development Strategy and Act in 2008. And that was under a minority conservative government. And as well, one of the mechanisms for implementation, as you know, it almost all works on subsidies, like everything else to do with sustainability equals subsidies. So when you look at the mechanism that was, I believe, now don't quote me on this, I believe the concept was first came up under Chrétien, but then it actually There was legislation went through under Martin, if I remember correctly, and it was something, do some searching, the title would be something in the lines of a New Deal for cities and communities. And what that did is it brought in a new mechanism for federal funding for infrastructure at the local level, at the municipal level. So you started getting these intergovernmental agreements, federal funding to local governments to help them with their financing for infrastructure.
And that kind
and
of
most people don't.
That kind of goes. Well, just a minute. That kind of goes with the statement from the Premier of Ontario, Wynne, when she was all excited about Trudeau getting in, because now we finally have a federal partner that we can work with, right?
They always have.
Yeah.
They always have, especially especially when it comes to sustainable development. Because as I was just going to say before I lose my train of thought here, the problem. The problem is how that worked out is most people don't read much, so they think of infrastructure as being only what the politicians like to talk about, not funding for local bridges and roads and blah, blah, blah. But it's what they don't say that really is what I like to watch. For instance, also defined under infrastructure, and again, I don't have it in front of me, so I can't give you the exact quote. It would be a whole show in itself. But it included what they called soft infrastructure, and which was specifically sustainability planning at the local level. And very specifically, it even said ICSPs, Integrated Community Sustainability Plans. So this is what was really ramped up once because the first Federal Sustainable Development Act was brought in by Chrétien. You know, Brian Mulroney didn't actually do it. He brought the stuff home with him from Rio. Chrétien took up where Mulroney left off, brought us our first federal sustainability program and strategy. And it really didn't do a heck of a lot till Martin brought that in, and then it started kicking in at the local level. But then the so-called conservatives took over from Martin and supported, basically what the liberals have started and built on that. And it was actually under the Harper Tories that funding became permanent.
Yeah, one of the quotes that always gets me is or one of the stories anyways, is Maurice Strong, who was head of CETA, who was tight with Trudeau, was going to run in, I think it was in 1968, for a political position.
Why would I do that?
And Rockefeller basically supposedly told Strong, like, what are you doing? We already control both sides, so we can get a lot more accomplished from the outside than we can from the inside, and that's why you have this continuation regardless of who's in power, because they are basically following the script laid down to them by people who are not in government.
Well, and each one brings something in, and then the next ones build on it, and exploit it further. And that's all I've seen happening, And it's funny because you talk about this inclusive. I can't help think too, because when you remember that little book that we've talked about, The New Despotism.
Yes.
Okay. And I've also enjoyed linking what was in that little booklet to what was written by a fellow, and he publishes his research work on the Galileo movement site in Australia. And he wrote a piece about the means of the implementation of Agenda 21. It was almost word for word what was in The New Despotism, and it totally parallels what we've seen here. So, it's been kind of interesting to see this going on, because that article, I'm really glad you talked about, Trudeau being inclusive and taking all of the party leaders, several people with them, the premiers especially, because most people have not really studied, what's been going on with the intergovernmental bureaucracies like the Council of the Federation, which they now call themselves, just the group name is Canada's Premiers. So when you look at that and you look at other governmental advisory groups that work in a harmonized fashion, between every level of government, like the Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment and the Canadian Council of Energy Ministers, which ran as a sub-department of the Federal Ministry of Natural Resources. And by the way, at that point, you might want to ask yourself why we have a Federal Ministry of Natural Resources, since natural resources was, under our so-called Constitution, a provincial jurisdiction. So again, you've got to look at the mechanisms for implementation of all of this. I can't think of a better word, so excuse me. I know it's crude, but crap. Okay? I can't think of a better means at every level than the new economic development paradigm. Unless, of course, you want to link that together with perhaps the new global public health agenda. The two of those, without those two mechanisms on board with the global agenda, I don't think the green energy would have had a prayer. That's just my own current hypothesis. Have I lost you?
No, you haven't. I was actually looking for a link to the new despotism, and I'm having a hard.
I put it in last week, didn't I?
Yeah, but let me see here if I can find it.
Do you want me to look it up?
Well, just if you find it before we're done, we can throw it in. I'm just having a hard time finding a clean link to it.
Okay, well.
If you come across it, because everybody should read that. Not only should they read it, they should make sure that they send it to their local council.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Because I'm not 100% sure that the councils, because I haven't been there in a while, but you go to the council meeting quite often, and you know that what's laid onto these councils, it's always the same thing because it's always a template. So when they want to move a new project forward, be it solar panels or watershed or trail systems or transit or whatever it might be, or saving electricity or water, the councils are always presented by the CAO, who's in charge of this nonsense of implementing Agenda 21, because they're schooled in how to implement it. And the idea is to implement it without letting the local people know what the hell's going on. And in a lot of cases, what the council doesn't know what's going on, because what they do is they lay out these papers that give examples of how Sydney, Australia implemented water savings, or Kenya, or some other place. So it's presented to the council, see the good work these people are doing, and we need to do the same thing. So they say, oh my God, we're not doing the same thing. We need to do the same thing. And that's a dangerous sales pitch, because these people aren't intelligent enough, I don't believe, although some of them are so well invested in this, they know exactly what they're doing. And the others that don't know, just being the sheep that people are, just follow along. So, it's all based on this, look what they're doing. Look what they're doing. We need to do the same thing because we're not being sustainable like they are being sustainable, so we got to pick it up. Am I wrong on any of that?
I don't think so. I'm just going to put a couple of links in here because if they will read, just read the New Despotism and the Four Warnings from 1929.
And it's not a very big book, so
no,
anybody
it's not.
Can read. It's only, 75 pages or something?
Yeah, I can't remember.
I can't either, but it's not much
I-
to read.
It's a short compared to what you and I usually read.
Yeah.
I think it's actually, but when you compare his forewarnings with the observations and research and references that were put out by Graham Williamson in a PDF that I've just put up for you, okay? And then you think about how this has taken place in Canada. Okay, and by the way, Graham Williamson's piece I just linked to it was how he has labeled it as betrayal of the Australian people on an unprecedented scale as Australia moves away from democracy, how successive governments have deceived the people, usurped the Constitution, and subverted democracy for more than 20 years. So that was his title and subtitle on it. And it really hit me having seen the New Despotism. I thought, this is just way too bizarre. You know, it can't be coincidental that there's so many similarities between the two. You know what? I have the feeling we're not even going to get to my little local economic development amusement, but that might be okay
we've got
once I get it in order and documented, it might have a better impact, especially if I can get past shows back online, you know, so they have the background.
Yeah, it's
hard to take something out of full context. And have people who haven't been following all along understand not only the you know, where it's coming from, where I'm coming from, but see the entertainment. That really, it's good for entertainment. So at least it gives you something to laugh at as they're breaking your piggy bank. You know,
well, yeah, I mean, the game is, you know, people have to get this through their heads, and I'm sure most of the listeners here already get that through their heads, but they don't have any detail, not to the extent that you have the detail. But this is about, if you just put it in simple terms, this is about bankrupting your ass.
Well, they have to, because another thing that I look at and I think of all the time, because I haven't seen any climate treaty proposal or any of the sustainable development agreements, you know, the update like the one we've just seen, Transforming Our World. They all depend on massive transfers of wealth from the developed industrialized nation to the developing countries. Okay, all of them. So every time I see a new one come out or study another one, I'm taken back to 1974. I believe it was April. Don't quote me again. I don't have this in front of me. I'm doing this off the top of my head. To the UN declaration that was titled the New International Economic Order. Now that is a long document. But guess what it's about? The transfer of wealth, you know, basically to create a global equity, you know, amongst global people globally, which the only way you can do that is to have, they're talking about equality of outcome. Okay, so everybody has the same amount of resource use, everybody has the same income, and of course their claim is that this serves the United Nations Charter. This is how they're going to create peace, world peace. Remember every beauty contestant in the 60s and 70s, their goal was world peace?
Yeah,
well, that's where all this crap comes from. You know, the idea that if nobody has more than somebody else, there'll be no jealousy. They're saying jealousy and greed, you know, is what's causing all of this, you know. So they want to eliminate the inequalities, the discrepancies. But there's only one way governments can do that, and that's to control what everyone has.
Yeah,
so this is your idea of a you know, guaranteed income. Well, we're seeing this pushed more and more. And that's what it's really about. And that one of the places that became really obvious is when I was studying the beginnings of the post-2015 agenda that Canada and every other UN member state signed on to on August 2nd, right? I'm trying to think of how to say this. We were seeing the same thing. We're seeing the same thing we've seen since 1974. And we've seen it through successive governments. The same agenda's been being pushed, ever more aggressively here since 1992. And in 2008, to my mind, it got a real ramping up. And I'm looking at what Trudeau's doing, and it's not the least bit surprising when you talk about inclusive. It's inclusive of all of the political party leaders and influential people and premiers, but it didn't invite me to go.
Didn't invite me neither. I'm waiting for it, but I haven't got it yet.
When you want to talk about inclusive, you might as well be talking about the community, as LARC and communitarianism would define it, because that's the only ones. And one place you see this is in, what interested me was I believe it was called, you can Google this, the Official Development Assistance Accountability Act.
Well, that sounds nice.
It's a short form. You could type in ODAAA. So, and again, this is when I was looking at the development of the new UN agenda that Canada agreed to on August 2nd, before the election.
But when we originally signed on to the United Nations, Kathy, if I'm not mistaken, and again, I don't have it in front of me either, but if I'm not mistaken, signing on to the UN agenda was basically a acknowledgement to move the United Nations agenda forward, whatever that might be.
Well, I'm not going to go that far back. You can go back to the 1800s, for heaven's sake. But what I was trying to say here is what got me about the ODAAA, okay, just so that I don't lose this.
Okay.
Because this is cute. That went through in March of 2008, that piece of legislation. So you want to read up on the history of that legislation. There's an interesting little bit on Wikipedia. Again, I don't rely 100% on Wikipedia because it's amazing how there can be discrepancies, but it's a great starting point.
I'm glad you said.
Read there about Romeo Dallaire's, his involvement in that act, and note that it says it was adopted unanimously. Now, this is March 2008, and remember that our Federal Sustainable Development Act, the one that replaced the original, was adopted in June of 2008. So 2008 was a big year. A lot of these things went on that most of us never even heard about because all of the focus in the media and everywhere else was on the big economic downturn, right?
Uh-huh.
So here's Kathy looking at this. What really grabbed me there was the definitions section in that act. It's a very short little act. Okay? The definition for Canadian values was, now again, I think it was something like amongst others or among others, but the three things that were named: equity, global citizenship, and environmental stewardship. Now, how many average Canadians would have put those as their top three Canadian values?
Well, nobody I know, but...
Well, so again, it's maybe a good thing that wasn't public information. So when you look at how that act is used and the role it plays in our money going as development assistance, out as development assistance, okay? And you hear all about, from what you'll see in the media is repetition of, the so-called Canadian values, rule of law, and, whatever. and we've heard Harper giving those speeches, and that's lovely. But then when you go and you read about, I think his name was Christian Parity, earlier this year, I believe it was February. Again, I don't have my notes in front of me. But the new, under the Harper Choice, early this spring, I'm sure it was, they announced this new partnership policy with civil society organizations. And that was interesting to see how that interlinks with this new agenda and the role that Canada played in its development and Canada's declared focus within that agenda. So you want to take a look at that, because then take a look at the federal government's consultation on that policy and look at who they consulted with. And even more interesting, look at the recommendations they got back from the organizations they consulted with, which would be considered another equation to the community, right? Because they're stakeholders. So if you take a look at all of that, then you interconnect that with all of the communities, little rinky-dink municipalities like ours even, that were so excited to be chosen as potential part in this Carol-led program through CETA. You remember that scandal?
Yeah.
Most people know nothing about it.
Yeah. See, I don't think very many people in these lands have any clue as to the influence of the foundations like the Rockefeller Foundations and Morris Strong and Power Corp. That never hits the newspapers. That never hits the TV news talkers. The people here have been, they've been basically blind.
Ezra Levant just put out a video not too long ago about his declared that Power Corp got put back in power when Justin got elected as Prime Minister. And I watched that and I started to laugh my head off because, of course, we've been dealing with here in our rinky-dink little village for 4 years. Uh-huh. And I'm like, well, that's news to me, to what I've been watching here and what I've been going through. They never left power.
That's it. That's why I don't have any use for Ezra Levant.
Well, he made some good.
He's just a player who confuses people because Power Corp never went anywhere.
Here's the thing I'm getting at, Ron.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's like listening to the politicians and reading a lot in the media. Unless you do your homework and you know all the background back 30, 40 years and you've really done your homework, it's not what they say. He said some things that were probably very informative to people that know nothing. And that's fine. But unfortunately, what they don't know is the more important things are what was not said. It's like every election, you hear all these debates between leaders and debates between candidates. And I'm like, it's so frustrating. Because what is most important are the things that are never even brought up.
And that's exactly what the NDP candidate who had been in the Bob Rae government in Ontario said to me at the end of the 2007 last all candidates meeting, when he came up to me and he said, and this is the absolute truth, and it's exactly what you just finished saying, this NDP candidate came up to me and said, I'd like to shake your hand. And I said, why? And this is his words. If you hadn't entered this election, not one issue of any importance would have ever seen the light of day. And you put him up on the table and had us dancing. Well,
we needed an independent running in every riding that I could feed, everything I wanted to talk about and get answers to. Right down to, do you remember that beautiful little quote that I got from a UCLG capacity building group? I think it was one of their background documents for a meeting in December 2012, I think it was. And a director from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities International and again, I don't have my notes in front of me, but it was something very close to the effect of governance in Canada is no longer a key issue. Well, you know, if we could get during a federal election campaign the questions that raises answered, that could tell us a lot that we've never known. Like, okay, so it's no longer a key issue. Well, first of all, how do you define governance?
Uh-huh.
Next, you say it's no longer a key issue. Well, when did that change?
Uh-huh.
And why? And how?
But see, this is the absolute necessity for people, and I keep telling them now. You read an article in the newspaper, you hear somebody on the TV, on a news channel or a talk channel or whatever, and anytime somebody comes up with an expert said or this was relayed, you really need to just, I mean, it's so simple today. Just take the name and attach it to whatever, or the United Nations, Rockefeller Foundation. Just have some fun with it. It's a name search, and that's the only way that you can get to the reality of what's being spoken, because they never give you the full story, or they never explain to you who this expert is. They just say it, and you're supposed to accept it. And unfortunately,
and
people
everything
do.
it says brings more questions to those of us who have more curiosity.
But that's how you. But that's how you
never
become.
Can get answers from anyone, anywhere. You know, and the only time you could actually probably make those kind of questions productive for other people as well as yourself is during an election campaign. So no wonder the topics discussed are basically determined by the parties and the media or whoever's hosting the local candidates meeting. I mean, that happened to us last provincial election. The people in the audience were basically, you know, irrelevant.
Well, they are irrelevant.
Unless you were a supporter.
The people in the audience, well, the average person in the audience, okay, went to a stage production. They're just simply, the actors are on the stage and the act is going on, and they are the audience. I mean, they're not there to be involved in it. They're there to ooh and ah it. You know, that's their job.
I'm reminded a great deal in Canada of something I read about in the past, and I believe it referred to Kissinger, if I'm correct. Try Googling it and see it. I believe it was referred to in a past document I read as the Republican Compact for America. So, you know, when you look at the global picture and you look at the global shift in political parties, and you know, this is what interested me in communitarianism, was exploring the potential links between the communitarian philosophy and what they called the third way, political triangulation, which was really, really touted by, I think it was Tony Blair, perhaps Gordon Brown in the UK as well, Bill Clinton in the US, you know, and then you look at what has happened. You know, again, you could look at it two ways. I wish I was younger, but I'm fortunate. Once you get into your 60s, you start seeing, you look back and things that you may have not jumped out at you at the time start really jumping out.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that's one of the plagues of old age.
Well, no, that's one of the benefits of it, because because you have a history to look back on, and the children who are in the schools now being totally messed with mentally, they have nothing to gauge anything against or weigh against. They're just they have no history, and we now have the history, things that I was pretty sure about, or things I questioned about, 40 years ago. I knew there was something wrong, but didn't get to the depth.
It kind of points out the need for revisionist history. you
Well,
know,
yeah.
it's sort of, if you want to take a very simple example, when the anti-smoking crusaders insisted that even in famous phonograph album covers, that anyone holding a cigarette, that'd be airbrushed out. Remember that? They had to airbrush those out. So this is the subtle editing of history. And, it's just... but again, I intended to come on today and talk about one little thing with funding, but I won't go on. I think maybe, we'll leave that for a future show. But, at least we did bring back in my interest in the new economic development paradigm.
Well,
because it's about as far from what was traditionally thought of by my generation as free enterprise. Now they're talking about, fair trade, free and fair trade, free and fair trade, I believe, was something straight out of the old PC Party constitution that was included in the new CPC Party founding documents. So, and because I'm so old, I remember
it up.
the arguments back in around 2003.
Can someone rush down?
Can
someone please rush down to Marmara with a walker and give it to Kathy, and maybe, I don't know, one of those lazy boys that lifts you up.
Kidding. Sometimes some mornings I'll tell you. Anyway, it just, back then there was an argument out there put out by a journalist, and I remember it really striking me because there were articles came out at the time about Jack Layton's ring, and his connection to the old PC Party. More recently, when we had the provincial election, we had Patrick Brown running, and there was a documentary started coming to light called Playing with Giants, into his political background, his heroes. That was really interesting. But back in 2003, this started coming out with the so-called new CPC Party, when they merged with, you got Peter MacKay and Harper signing this deal, forming a new party. And there was an opinion, an op-ed out there about, the PCs merged with the wrong party. It would have made more sense for them to merge with the NDP. I couldn't agree more. I agreed then. I agree even more now. And I think that, one of the big reasons that Justin Trudeau, his campaign was so successful, as I saw it, the NDP literally committed suicide on his behalf.
Well, yes, but see, this is all orchestrated.
Obviously, it was.
When all the way through for the first half of the election, the NDP were going to take a majority government. Then the Conservatives were ahead, and the Liberals weren't really even players in this thing for most of the election. And then obviously word came down that Mouclair is not the man. We got to bring Justin back in, or bring the Trudeau dynasty back, because it doesn't really matter, because had it been a minority government, we would end up with the same thing anyways. They would come together collectively. But now what we have here is we have this inclusiveness. So
that we've always had.
What we've done is we've elected the NDP and the Green Party into power through this inclusiveness thing, and they will keep the Conservatives separated because they're not part of this new push. So we have everybody elected now, and I am almost certain. I'm seeing stuff on Facebook and that people are pushing for Elizabeth Bay to become the environment minister. Well, this inclusiveness thing is very simple. They don't have, what do they got, 2 seats in the whole country? It's very simple for Elizabeth Bay to say goodbye to the party and walk across the floor and become a Liberal.
Well, the floor crossings are yet to come. We've seen floor crossings throughout my life increase, and floor crossings that shock people who are think that there's a great difference between the parties. It shocks them. When you look at it from my bigger perspective, no, there's nothing shocking there at all. But, I don't see as any particular party actually won this election. All I can see is that the average person lost. Again, and the UN gained a lot more traction, and the implementation, given the leadership right now, the political leadership, it may speed up, it may not, because, we don't have a crystal ball. None of us have a crystal ball. All you can go on is what you know from the past and watch the trends as they're developing to make, based on certain assumptions, some type of prediction. But you can't guarantee you're going to be right. And we've seen unexpected things happen so often. Literally, you're seeing so-called Conservative Party faithfuls out crying in their beer, wringing their hands. The fear-mongering.
I know.
Over, what's going to happen under Trudeau? We're going down. And I'm like, well, given past trends, we may go down a little faster for a while, or we may not, because what they forget is we have no idea what would have happened if another party, And given what's gone on in the past, the Liberals are very great at touting their accomplishments and very open about what they want to do, with this agenda in moving forward. But the problem is, what most people don't realize, the Conservatives haven't talked that way, but on taking action towards the same thing, to my mind, they've done equally well to the other parties, if not better.
Well, the thing that bothers me, I think, the most is the number of provincial premiers and ex-premiers and that who have gone to Bilderberg meetings, and the fact that they've been attending the Trilateral Commission meetings. And I think the thing that disturbs me most of all was the appointment of Elizabeth Dowdeswell to the lieutenant governor, because I watched a video where she said specifically that she's sick and tired of this incrementalism. As they bring this forward, I just want it done. So now we have what they would call in the media a perfect storm set up here. We have the inclusiveness of the reigning government embracing the other parties, who are basically all on board, with a lieutenant governor in Ontario, with a premier in Ontario who doesn't see any problem with thumbing her nose at the federal immigration rules by allowing these sanctuary cities, which completely breaks the immigration law, who's running around cutting carbon credit agreements with California and Quebec, which I would think is completely out of her jurisdiction to do. So
this is something you're getting into the territory covered by the new despotism as well. So you want to start looking at the intergovernmental agreements at the subnational level, because that's where the action really is. And this is what you're seeing out of Justin Trudeau. He actually talked about what has already been going on when he talked about, empowering the subnational level, by their greater participation in the climate change agreements and treaties. So he's actually brought out to the public a chance to look back at what they didn't know that has already been going on. You know what I'm saying there?
Uh-huh.
But how many people will, I don't know. But I mean, the information's out there. They just don't talk about it. They just hadn't talked about it. But you talked about, Harper's appointment of Dowdeswell. Well, that should have been no shock, because, in the same time period, bang, bang, bang. I mean, last year was a big year for the Conservatives, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, because of my local involvement fighting these guys. I mean, what was $125 million euro loan to Northland Power for their offshore wind farm in the North Sea, Gemini, from so-called Conservatives that don't like wind?
I know.
Right. And then there was more recently than that in Tony Clement's riding, You know, how much money did they give towards that wind project near Parry Sound? I think it's Henley Inlet or something they called that. And then, you know, all of this is linked in my document. Well, not all of it, some of it. But the other thing is around the same time period that Elizabeth Dowdeswell was appointed Ontario's Lieutenant Governor, they also appointed Prince Charles to the Privy Council.
Yeah, I know. That's another.
So, I mean, put it all together, and I'm not going to be wringing my hands in fear and terror just because Justin Trudeau's the new Prime Minister-elect. Like, it makes no sense.
No, but all I'm saying is that they between. I mean, it boggles my mind that all this dump Harper stuff, that nobody that's yelling dump Harper understands just how much Harper and his government, moved the green movement forward.
Exactly. Well, that because again, you've got people who are voting on very little knowledge of their own. You know,
Right.
They're sponges for political party stuff, activist group stuff, media stuff. But, you know, even talking to local candidates, you know, I talked to one local candidate at length, and he was glorifying the party platform and what he wanted to do for, you know, his constituents. And, you know, I just said to him, well, you know, do you think you can actually do any of these things if they contradict the party agenda as a whole? You know, and I got really no clear answer to that question. You know, the whole his whole idea, he's so lacking in understanding of the basic models and frameworks that I thought, wow.
That's what they call the useful idiots, right? They flatter these people, and you know, most of those who run for political parties have had you know, time on a local council somewhere, or they were a warden or a mayor, and so you know, it's like the indoctrination house. They're flattered, they're vetted, and they're not intelligent. And they're moved forward. So when you ask them a simple, intelligent question, they don't have the capacity to answer it.
Yeah.
Because they just don't have the capacity. But what I find dangerous, Kathy, is that because all of the local municipal councils are creations of the province, and they are bound to do what the province tells them to do. And the local municipalities are already set under Agenda 21, under this conservation plan, and that you know, and we have that. I forget what the name of that French water company is that's rooting around here in Ontario, coming in to privatize our water and sewer systems, and that our municipalities are being told by doing this, just like they privatized the hydro, that they will benefit financially, and that the municipalities have to start running more like a business, which they are classified as, not government but business. That this Trudeau-May NDP coalition thing, this inclusiveness, opens the door to okay the quicker movement of this stuff forward. That's what concerns me more than anything.
Well, again, you know, if you think of what Lark was talking about in communitarian philosophy, and then take what I'm talking about and the political triangulation that's gone on, called the third way, and that's gone on everywhere, then that inclusiveness has been there for a long, long time, and it has been a great part of the problem for the average person, and it has also been a great boost to the global elitists, because that way, as they say, sustainability requires that there be no disruption to the advancement of their agenda due to voter fickleness. You know, I mean, you can't have sustainability if you can have it disrupted by a group of voters. No, that won't do.
No, exactly, that won't do.
Well, that you just can't have that.
No.
So you have to take it you have to take it to a bureaucratic level. I'm not saying that the people sitting on these bureaucratic entities are not elected politicians. I'm just saying that they were not elected by any one group of voters to that bureaucratic collective. And that would hold the same for any county government, most regional governments, regional wardens caucuses, no matter where they are, the Council of the Federations, the collective of the premiers, the collective of energy ministers at the provincial level as well as at the federal level, the CCME that harmonizes all environmental policies Canada-wide at every level.
And
hello, people.
Yeah, hello, people.
And then they get excited about what party's elected.
I know that.
It's a mean joke on the people.
It is. It's a bad joke on the people. Joke.
Yeah.
But I'm going to have to look at that document I ran across in Ontario here, and it'll be the same in every other province, and it'll be the same in the United States and Australia and everywhere else, is that this so-called government we have, in Ontario, there's 500 plus boards, commissions, agencies that were instituted by the said governments, which are in fact outside the reach of the governments. And I would suspect, I didn't go through the whole list, but I would suspect there's an awful lot of this environmental stuff, these boards and stuff that are set down. But they're bureaucratic things but while they're created by the government, they're outside the reach of the government, so people can't say to the government, look what you did.
When you look at the guidance and control of them, a lot of it is done from, again, I think of Elaine Dewar's book, Cloak of Green, and, governance by committees and boards, and, unelected groups. And that's exactly what we're seeing, And by the way, I see Ducky there in the chat. I don't know if he'll acknowledge hearing me or not. Did you give him my message yesterday about his MP elect?
Yeah. No, I was talking to him
he got
after
that
the show
message,
for
right?
a few minutes, and he
because
said,
that's really important.
No, he said I screwed up. I got the wrong one, but it's the same deal. Yeah, that's why I said we each put a paper bag over our heads and went and stood in the corner because you were paying attention to us, and we messed up a little bit. So this is why I love you so much.
Figure it out. I thought, what's going on in that?
Well, it's a slip. It's a slip, right? Duck's Duck's fallen off the scaffold a few times and probably banged his head. So we'll let it go with that.
I've done it more than once.
He was right in his assessment of the one thing, and there's too much of this family compact going on here, where the fathers or the sons follow the fathers. And, with all of the people in the country, how is it that it's father-son all the time who are taking up these political positions and getting elected? Anyways, I think we're about
the sad thing, too, for, the average person who thinks they're going to go out and vote for a different party or even the same party is if they are not aware of higher level international umbrella groups of which that party is a member, and therefore they have to align to the umbrella group's international principles and agreements. Well,
exactly.
And this is another area that most people are really unfamiliar with.
People don't go to the international
that's where you
side.
Really, it's what they don't talk about and what you don't know. And again, I've yet to hear even the big, brave rebel media discuss any of this. And again, the best time to bring this up for public discussion is during an election campaign, because that's when people might actually listen to you.
Well, that's why
But you notice it never happens.
Yeah.
Never.
Anyways, I think we are about 30 seconds from hearing music or sooner, somewhere in there anyway, so I want to thank you. I've been wanting you on for so long, and I know how busy you are. And, so maybe we can do this again. I hope we can. I'm sure we can. and get a little bit deeper and a little bit broader on this subject, and try to get people to go and get them documents to read and whatnot. And it's funny. Oh, I can't say it now because I hear music right out of town. So I want to thank the listeners. I want to thank those in the chat for participating. I especially want to thank Kathy. I'm so happy you came on today. Great. I'm glad we got that Thank you, everyone. Have a great day, and I'll be back Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. Okay, Kathy, thank you.
No one lives trees lie to your face.